The knock came at the stroke of midnight, 3 sharp raps against oak that woke Oliver Yates from dreams of autumn wheat and winter stores. And when he opened the door with his hunting knife loose in his belt, expecting bandits or worse, he found instead a woman collapsed against his doorframe with 3 small children clinging to her ragged cloak. She was an orc, unmistakably so, with skin the color of summer moss and 2 small tusks curving up from her lower jaw, and the children pressed against her were the same, their pointed ears visible even in the lantern light that spilled from Oliver's farmhouse. The woman's eyes, amber and fierce despite her obvious exhaustion, met his for just a moment before her knees buckled. Oliver caught her by pure instinct, his farmer's strength enough to keep her from crashing to the porch. The children cried out, their voices thin and frightened, and he saw in the lamplight just how skeletal they all were, how their clothes hung on frames that should have been fuller, stronger. The oldest could not have been more than 8, a girl with her mother's green skin and eyes that held far too much wariness for her age. The 2 younger ones, boys by the look of their faces, might have been 6 and 4, and they stared at Oliver with the hollow gaze of the truly starving. "Please," the woman whispered, her voice cracking. "My children, just my children. You can turn me away, but please, they need food." Oliver had fought in the border wars 15 years ago, had seen orc raiders burn villages and carry off livestock, had lost friends to their axes and arrows. He had every reason to slam the door shut, to drive them off his land with curses and threats. The whole valley would expect nothing less. Orcs were the enemy, had always been the enemy, and showing them mercy was the kind of foolishness that got honest farmers killed in their beds. But these were not raiders. This was a mother and 3 children who looked like they had not eaten in days, perhaps weeks, and Oliver Yates had never been the kind of man who could turn away from genuine suffering, no matter what form it wore. "Get inside," he said gruffly, adjusting his grip on the woman to take more of her weight. "All of you, quickly now before you freeze out here." The girl herded her brothers through the door with the efficiency of someone long accustomed to the role. Oliver half carried the mother to his kitchen table, easing her into the chair nearest the fire. Up close, he could see the lines of pain around her mouth, the way her hands trembled as she gripped the table's edge. She was younger than he had first thought, perhaps no more than 25, but hardship had carved years into her features. "When did you last eat?" Oliver asked, already moving to his pantry. He pulled out bread, cheese, dried meat, a jar of preserves his sister had sent from town. The children's eyes followed every movement, wide and hungry. 3 days, the mother said softly. "We had some roots the first day, nothing since. 3 days. Oliver felt something cold and angry settle in his chest, not at them but at whatever circumstances had brought them to this state. He set the food on the table and watched the children look to their mother for permission, before touching anything. When she nodded, they fell on it with the desperate restraint of those who had learned that eating too fast on an empty stomach brought only pain. "Slowly," Oliver cautioned, pouring milk from his cold cellar into 4 cups. "Your bellies need time to remember what food is." The mother took small, careful bites of bread, her eyes never leaving her children. Oliver busied himself at the stove, heating up yesterday's stew. It was rabbit and turnip, simple fare, but the smell of it filled the kitchen, and he saw the youngest boy actually start to cry at the scent. "What are your names?" Oliver asked, keeping his voice gentle as he stirred the pot. The mother hesitated, and he could see her weighing whether honesty was safe. Finally, she said, "I am Dira Jorah. This is my daughter Kessa, my sons Pren and little Tavar." She touched each child's head as she named them, a gesture so tender it made Oliver's chest ache. "Oliver Yates," he replied. This is my farm, has been for 10 years now, since I mustered out of the army and came looking for peace and quiet. He ladled stew into bowls, setting one before each child and one before Dira. Eat. We can talk after you've got something warm in you. They ate in silence, broken only by the crack of the fire and the scrape of spoons on wooden bowls. Oliver watched Dira give most of her portion to her children when she thought he was not looking, and he quietly refilled her bowl without comment. The second helping she ate herself, and some of the terrible tension in her shoulders began to ease. Kessa, the eldest, was the first to finish. She set down her spoon with careful precision and looked at Oliver with those two old eyes. "Why are you helping us?" she asked bluntly. "Kessa," Dira said sharply, but Oliver held up a hand. "It is a fair question." He poured himself a cup of milk and sat down across from them. "I am helping because you needed help and I have food to spare. It is not complicated." "Humans do not help orcs," Kessa said flatly. "They throw rocks. They spit. They chase us away." "Well, I am not throwing rocks or spitting or chasing anyone anywhere tonight," Oliver said. "How old are you, Kessa?" 8.5. "When I was 8.5, I was an orphan living on the charity of my uncle, who was not a kind man. He fed me, but he made sure I knew every bite was a burden to him, something I had to earn with work and gratitude and silence." Oliver met Kessa's eyes steadily. "I swore then that if I ever had the means to help someone who was hungry, I would do it, and I would not make them feel small for needing it. That includes you." Kessa studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Her brothers were already nodding off, their bellies full for the first time in days, exhaustion claiming them fast. Dira looked like she might collapse where she sat. "There is a room upstairs," Oliver said. "It was meant for farmhands during harvest, but I work alone these days. It has 2 beds and plenty of blankets. You all need rest." "We cannot stay," Dira said, but her voice held no conviction. "We should not put you at risk. If your neighbors knew you sheltered orcs, my neighbors are a half-mile away in any direction, and none of them make a habit of calling at midnight," Oliver interrupted. "You will stay at least until morning, until you have strength to walk without falling. That is not negotiable." Dira looked at him with an expression he could not quite read, something between gratitude and disbelief. "Why?" she whispered. Oliver stood, gathering the empty bowls. "Because it is the right thing to do. Come on, I will show you upstairs." He lit a lantern and led them up the narrow staircase to the second floor. The farmhand room was simple but clean, with 2 rope beds and a trunk full of quilts. Oliver pulled out blankets, shaking them out across the mattresses while Dira swayed on her feet and the children clung to her skirts. "I will be downstairs if you need anything," he said. "There is a chamber pot under the far bed and water in the pitcher on the stand. Rest as long as you need." "Thank you," Dira said, and there was a world of emotion in those 2 words. Oliver nodded and left them to it, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. He went back downstairs and stood in his kitchen, looking at the dirty bowls and the half-empty pot of stew, trying to make sense of what he had just done. By the laws of the valley, he should have turned them away. By the memory of his fallen friends, he should have driven them off with the flat of his axe. But when he closed his eyes, all he saw was Dira's face, the desperate love of a mother trying to save her children, and he knew with bone-deep certainty that he had made the only choice he could live with. He cleaned the dishes, banked the fire, and went to his own bed, but sleep was a long time coming. Morning came with frost on the windows and pale sunlight slanting through the kitchen. Oliver rose early as he always did and started the fire, set coffee to brewing, mixed batter for griddle cakes. He was flipping the 3rd batch when he heard footsteps on the stairs, light and cautious. Dira appeared in the doorway, Tavar on her hip, and the other two children trailing behind her. She had tried to tidy herself, smoothing her hair back from her face and brushing the worst of the road dust from her clothes, but she still looked worn thin, like fabric washed too many times. "Good morning," Oliver said, gesturing to the table. "Sit. There are griddle cakes and syrup, eggs if you want them." "You do not have to feed us again," Dira said, but she was already setting Tavar down and pulling out chairs for the children. "I am feeding myself. You are just joining me." Oliver set a platter of griddle cakes on the table, watched the children's eyes light up. Kessa actually smiled, a quick flash of expression that transformed her solemn little face. They ate with better manners this morning, their stomachs no longer screaming with emptiness. Oliver scrambled eggs in his heavy iron skillet, added cheese and herbs from his windowsill garden. Dira helped by pouring milk for everyone, moving around his kitchen with the ease of someone accustomed to feeding a family. "Where are you headed?" Oliver asked when the meal had slowed. "If you do not mind me asking." Dira's face tightened. "North. There are supposed to be orc settlements in the high valleys, communities that will take us in. But we have been walking for 2 weeks and we are still in human lands. I thought we had enough food. I was wrong. What happened?" The question was gentle. "You do not have to answer, but my husband died 6 months ago," Dira said, staring at her plate. "Fever took him. We lived in a mixed village on the eastern border, worked as laborers. When he died, the landlord turned us out. Said he only rented to families, not widows with children. We had nowhere to go." "That is illegal," Oliver said sharply. "The king's law says the king's law means very little when you are an orc," Dira said with bitter calm. "The magistrate would not hear my complaint, so we left. I thought we could make it north before winter. I thought I could keep them safe." Her voice cracked on the last word. Kessa reached out and took her mother's hand. "You did keep us safe, Mama. We are all right." Dira pulled her daughter close, pressing her face to Kessa's hair. Oliver looked away, giving them privacy for the moment, his mind racing. The high valleys were at least 3 more weeks of walking, maybe 4 with small children in tow. Winter was coming fast. He could smell it on the wind. They would never make it, not without supplies, not without help. "Stay here," he said abruptly, 4 sets of eyes fixed on him. Dira shook her head. "We cannot." "I told you if your neighbors knew, stay for a week," Oliver amended. "Rest, eat properly. I will give you supplies for the journey, traveling food and warm clothes. There is snow coming. I can feel it. A week will not make much difference to your travel time, but it might make all the difference to whether you arrive healthy or half frozen." "Why would you do this?" Dira asked, echoing her daughter's question from the night before. Oliver poured himself more coffee, considering his words. 15 years ago, I was a soldier fighting in the border wars. I saw terrible things. I did terrible things. When I mustered out, I came here looking for a life where I could grow things instead of destroying them, where I could build instead of burning. Helping you feels like part of that. Does that make sense? You fought against orcs," Dira said quietly. "It was not a question." "I did. I will not lie to you about that. And now you offer us sanctuary." She shook her head slowly, something like wonder in her eyes. "You are a strange man, Oliver Yates, so I have been told." He stood, gathering dishes. "The offer stands. 1 week. After that, I will pack you enough food to reach the northern valleys and warm cloaks for all of you. But you should rest first." Dira was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "What would you have us do? We cannot simply eat your food and sleep under your roof without contributing." "You do not owe me work, I know," Dira interrupted. "But I need to feel useful, please." Oliver understood that. Pride was sometimes all a person had left. "I am preparing the root cellar for winter. There are potatoes to sort, apples to wrap, preserves to organize." and the children could gather the last of the garden, bring in the green tomatoes before the frost kills them. "We can do that," Dira said firmly. Kessa and Pren nodded eagerly, so they fell into a routine, strange as it was. Oliver showed Dira to the root cellar, a cool stone-lined room beneath the kitchen. Together they hauled up bushel baskets of potatoes, spreading them on the floor to check for rot and damage. Dira worked with quick efficiency, her strong hands sorting through tubers with practiced ease. "You know farming," Oliver observed. "My mother had a garden plot when I was young, not a farm like this, but enough to teach me the basics." Dira tossed a soft potato into the discard pile. "That was before the wars, before our village was destroyed. We scattered after that. I was 12. "I am sorry," Oliver said quietly. Dira shrugged, but there was old pain in the gesture. "It was a long time ago, and you were likely fighting on the other side, so I do not know what your sorrow means. It was a fair point, and it stung." Oliver set down the apple he was wrapping in newspaper and looked at her directly. "I was 17 when I enlisted. I believed what they told me, that orcs were monsters, that you would sweep down and slaughter us all if we did not fight. It took me 2 years to realize that most of the orcs we were fighting were just people defending their homes, same as us. By then, I had already done things I cannot take back." "Like what?" Dira's amber eyes were steady on his face. "I burned a village," Oliver said. The words tasted like ash. "We were told it was a raider stronghold. It was just farmers. There were children." He stopped, his throat closing. He had never spoken of this, not to anyone. Dira was quiet. Then she said, "Did you know, before you set the fires?" "No, we did not know until after, when we searched the ruins." Oliver's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his thighs. "My commanding officer said it did not matter, that orcs were all the same. I mustered out at the end of my term and never went back, but it does not erase what I did." "No," Dira agreed. "It does not." She picked up another potato, examined it, set it in the keep pile. "But you opened your door to us last night. You fed my children. That does not erase it either, but it is something." It was more grace than he deserved. Oliver nodded, not trusting his voice, and they went back to work in a silence that felt less like avoidance and more like mutual understanding. Upstairs, the children were having better luck. Kessa had found Oliver's garden baskets and was directing her brothers with the authority of a seasoned commander, showing them which tomatoes to pick and which to leave, how to handle the squash without bruising. Oliver watched from the cellar door as Tavar, the youngest, carefully cradled a single green tomato in both hands, his face serious with concentration. "Your children are good workers," he told Dira. She smiled, a real smile this time, and it changed her whole face, made her look young and almost carefree. "They are good children, better than I deserve." "I doubt that. They worked through the morning, breaking for a simple lunch of bread and cold chicken." The children ate on the porch, enjoying the weak autumn sunshine, while Dira and Oliver sat at the kitchen table. She asked about the farm, and Oliver found himself telling her about the first year, when his crops had failed, and he had nearly starved himself before a good neighbor had loaned him seed for a second planting. About learning to build fences and repair roofs, all the skills he had never needed as a soldier. About the satisfaction of watching wheat grow golden in his fields. "You love it," Dira said. "This place, this life." "I do," Oliver admitted. "It is simple, but it is mine, and I have never hurt anyone by growing wheat." "That is a good life," Dira said softly. In the afternoon, Oliver taught the children to card wool. He had a small flock of sheep, just enough to keep him in clothes and blankets, with some extra to trade in town. Kessa picked it up immediately, her quick fingers working the cards with growing confidence. Pren was more interested in petting the raw fleece, declaring it soft and warm. Tavar fell asleep in a basket of clean wool, looking like the world's grumpiest lamb. Dira laughed when she saw him, a sound that Oliver realized he had not heard from her before. It was a good laugh, warm and genuine. She scooped Tavar up carefully, wool and all, and carried him to the fireside chair. "He has not been sleeping well," she said, settling him against her shoulder. "None of us have. Too scared, too hungry. Last night was the first time in weeks he slept through without nightmares. He is safe here," Oliver said. "You all are." Dira met his eyes over Tavar's small head. For how long? It was the question Oliver had been avoiding. "A week," he had said. 1 week, and then they would leave, head north into the coming winter, and he would likely never know if they arrived safely or froze on some mountain pass. The thought sat in his stomach like a stone. "As long as you need," he heard himself say. Dira's eyes widened. "Oliver, you cannot mean that." "Your neighbors, your reputation. I have been out here for 10 years with no trouble from my neighbors. They leave me alone and I leave them alone. Most of them would not notice if I had guests for a month. And when winter comes, when you go to town for supplies." Oliver had not thought that far. He frowned, working through the logistics. "I buy most of my winter supplies in bulk before the first snow. I already did that 3 weeks ago. I will not need to go back until spring unless something goes badly wrong." "You are saying we could stay through winter?" Dira's voice was very quiet. "I am saying you do not have to leave before you are ready. The high valleys will still be there in spring, and you will have a much easier time reaching them after thaw than before the snows." Oliver stood, suddenly nervous, and went to poke at the fire. "That is, if you want to stay. I am not trying to trap you here. You are free to leave whenever you choose." "Why are you doing this?" Dira asked for the 3rd time, and Oliver turned to face her. "Because I have more space than I need and more food than I can eat alone. Because your children deserve a warm winter and enough to eat. Because you deserve rest, after everything you have been through." He hesitated, then added, "And because I like having you here. It has been a long time since this house felt like a home instead of just a place I sleep." Dira's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "If we stay, we work. I will not be a burden. Fair enough. I could use help with winter preparations, and Kessa is already better at carding wool than I am." Oliver managed a smile. "But you rest first. Another week of decent food before you start hauling firewood." 3 days, Dira negotiated. "I am stronger than I look. I can see that." They fell into a rhythm over the following days. Dira regained her strength quickly once she was eating regularly, and she threw herself into the work of the farm with determined energy. She knew how to do things Oliver had always struggled with, like smoking meat and making soap and weaving rush baskets. In return, he taught her about managing livestock and crop rotation, and the 100 small repairs that kept a farm running. The children thrived. Kessa lost some of her wary edge, started asking questions about everything she saw. She was bright, Oliver realized, quick-minded and curious when she felt safe enough to show it. Pren was quieter but had a gift with animals. The chickens that usually scattered when Oliver approached would eat from Pren's hand without fear. And Tavar, little Tavar, started to laugh, a sound like bells. Evenings were the best times. They would gather around the fireplace after supper, and Oliver would read aloud from the small collection of books he owned. Dira would mend clothes or card wool, and the children would sprawl on the rug, listening with rapt attention to stories of far-off places and grand adventures. Sometimes Kessa would read instead, stumbling over words she did not know but improving every night. "Where did you learn to read?" Oliver asked one evening, impressed by her determination. "My father taught me," Kessa said. He said education was the one thing no one could take from us. He was a wise man, Oliver said. He was, Dira agreed softly. I miss him. The moment hung heavy in the room. Then Pren asked if they could hear the story about the dragon again, and the sadness passed, replaced by the comfort of familiar words and crackling fire. 2 weeks became 3. Oliver showed Dira how to milk his cow, and she showed him a recipe for cheese her mother had taught her. They fell into an easy partnership, working side by side in comfortable silence or trading stories about their pasts. Oliver learned that Dira had a gift for singing, old orc ballads in a language he did not understand, but that sounded beautiful nonetheless. Dira learned that Oliver was scared of spiders, a fact that made her laugh until she cried. You fought in a war, she gasped, but you are afraid of spiders. They have too many legs, Oliver said defensively, which only made her laugh harder. The children started calling him Oliver instead of Sir or Farmer Yates, which felt like a victory of sorts. Kessa asked if he could teach her to read better, and they spent an hour each afternoon working through his books together. Pren wanted to learn to carve wood, so Oliver found him a soft piece of pine and a small knife, and showed him how to make simple shapes. Tavar followed Oliver everywhere, chattering in the way of 4-year-olds, asking endless questions about everything he saw. It felt like a family. The thought scared Oliver more than he wanted to admit. He had lived alone for so long, had convinced himself he was content with solitude. But now, his house was full of voices and laughter and life, and the idea of going back to silence felt unbearable. He was in trouble, he realized. Deep, complicated trouble. The first snow came on a night in late October, fat flakes drifting down in the darkness. Oliver woke to a transformed world, everything blanketed in white. He went downstairs to find Dira already at the stove, making porridge. She smiled at him, and his heart did something complicated in his chest. The children have never seen snow like this, she said. In the lowlands we got frost, maybe a dusting, but this Kessa is already planning to build snow fortifications. She would, Oliver said, grinning. He poured coffee for them both. We should bundle them up properly. It is beautiful, but it is cold. They spent the morning playing in the snow. Oliver taught the children how to make snow angels and build snowmen, showed them how to pack snow for throwing. A snowball fight erupted, children versus adults, and ended with everyone breathless and laughing and soaked through. Dira's cheeks were flushed green, her amber eyes bright with joy, and Oliver thought she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The thought struck him silent. Dira noticed, tilted her head questioningly. Just cold, Oliver lied, and she accepted it, herding her children inside for dry clothes and hot cocoa. But the truth sat in his chest, undeniable. He was falling in love with her. With all of them, really, but especially with Dira, who was brave and strong and gentle, who sang her children to sleep and laughed at his spider fear and worked beside him like they had been partners for years. It was impossible, of course. She was an orc, he was human. She had lost her husband only months ago. She was planning to leave in the spring to reach those northern settlements. And even if none of that mattered, even if she felt the same way, what kind of life could they have? The valley would never accept them. His neighbors might look the other way at him hosting refugees for a winter, but a relationship, a family. Oliver pushed the thoughts down and focused on getting through each day. But it got harder as November wore on, as they worked together preparing the farm for deep winter. Harder still when Dira smiled at him across the dinner table, or when their hands brushed reaching for the same tool. He caught her watching him sometimes with an expression he could not quite read, something soft and wondering. The turning point came on a cold afternoon when they were cutting firewood together. The children were inside, working on lessons Kessa had devised for her brothers. Dira wielded the maul with confident strength, splitting logs with clean strikes while Oliver stacked the pieces. They had been working in comfortable silence for an hour when Dira suddenly said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Have you ever thought about marrying again, having a family?" She kept her eyes on the wood, not looking at him. Oliver's heart hammered. "I was never married. Came close once before the war, but she married someone else while I was deployed. After I mustered out, I was too busy trying to keep this place running to think about courting." He paused. "Why do you ask?" Dira set down the maul, finally meeting his eyes. "Because you would be a good father. Husband, you are kind and patient, and you make my children feel safe. I see how Tavar follows you around, how Kessa asks you questions she never asked her own father. They love you." "I love them too," Oliver said quietly. "All of you." The words hung in the cold air between them. Dira's eyes went wide, her lips parting in surprise. "I know it is impossible," Oliver continued, the words spilling out now that he had started. "I know you are planning to leave, and I would never ask you to stay out of obligation, and I know the valley would have thoughts about a human and an orc, but Dira, I think about you all the time. I wake up happy because I know I will see you at breakfast. I look forward to evenings by the fire more than I have looked forward to anything in years. You make me want things I thought I had given up on." Dira crossed the space between them in 2 strides and kissed him. It was brief, barely more than a press of lips, but it sent electricity down Oliver's spine. When she pulled back, she was blushing deep green, her eyes searching his face. "I did not think you felt the same," she whispered. "I have been trying so hard not to hope." Oliver kissed her again, properly this time, cupping her face in his hands. She made a small sound of surprise and pleasure, her fingers curling into his shirt. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I think I started falling for you that first night," Oliver admitted. "When you asked me to save your children even if it meant leaving you behind, I saw who you were, and I have not been able to look away since. I started falling when you fed us without asking anything in return," Dira said. She laughed shakily. "We are a mess, Oliver Yates. You know that, right? This will not be easy. Nothing worth having is easy." Oliver pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "Stay, not just for the winter, stay. The valley can adjust. I am not asking you to hide. I am asking you to build a life with me. Here on this farm, you and me and the children." Dira's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that, claim us, knowing what it would mean." "I would be honored to claim you," Oliver said, "if you will have me." "Yes," Dira breathed. "Yes, you strange, wonderful man. Yes." They stood in the woodpile, holding each other while the winter wind blew cold around them, and Oliver felt something settle in his chest, a rightness he had not known he was missing. They told the children that night after supper. Kessa looked between them with knowing eyes and said, "Finally, I thought you would never figure it out." Pren asked if this meant they could stay forever, and when Oliver said yes, he whooped with joy. Tavar climbed into Oliver's lap and announced that he wanted to call him Papa, and Oliver had to blink back tears. "Are we getting married?" Kessa asked practically. "Because Mama should have a new dress if we are getting married, and I think we should have a cake." "We are getting married," Dira confirmed, smiling, "but it will have to wait until spring when the minister can travel out from town." "We could do a hand fasting now," Oliver suggested. "Just us. A private ceremony, and then a formal wedding in spring if you want one." Dira considered this, then nodded. "I like that. Something that is just ours first." They held the hand fasting ceremony 3 days later on the winter solstice. Oliver wove a cord from red and green thread, the colors blending together in a pattern that spoke of unity and new beginnings. They stood in front of the fireplace with the children as witnesses, and Oliver bound their hands together with the cord, speaking vows he had written himself. "I promise to stand with you through all seasons," he said. "To work beside you, to protect your children as my own, to love you in sunlight and shadow. I promise to never make you feel small for needing help, and to ask for help when I need it too. I promise to build a life with you that is worth living." Dira's vows were simpler. "I promise to love you, to trust you, to make this house a home. I promise to stand beside you against whatever comes. I promise that you will never be alone again." They sealed it with a kiss, and Kessa clapped while the boys cheered. It was not a legal marriage, not yet, but it felt real and binding and right. Winter deepened. Oliver taught Kessa to read and write more complex words, introduced her to mathematics and history from his small library. She soaked up knowledge like dry ground drinking rain. Pren developed a talent for carpentry, and Oliver set up a workbench for him in the barn where he could practice. Tavar was content to help with small tasks and chatter endlessly, his vocabulary growing by the day. And Dira became Oliver's partner in everything. They worked the farm together, planned for spring planting together, made decisions about supplies and repairs together. At night, they shared the bed that had been Oliver's alone for so long, and Oliver learned the warmth of falling asleep with someone he loved in his arms. It was not perfect. There were hard moments, times when Dira woke crying from dreams of her first husband, when the children had nightmares about the time they had spent starving and scared. Oliver had his own ghosts, memories of war that crept up at unexpected times. But they faced it together, and that made all the difference. December brought bitter cold and deep snow. They were trapped on the farm, cut off from the outside world, but it felt less like isolation and more like sanctuary. Oliver taught the children to play card games and chess. Dira taught everyone orc songs and showed them how to make traditional orc foods from the supplies in Oliver's pantry. They celebrated the winter holidays with what they had, giving simple gifts of carved wood and knitted scarves and honey cakes. On Christmas morning, Oliver gave Dira a wooden box he had carved with intricate patterns, flowers and vines intertwined. Inside was a ring he had made from braided silver wire, simple but beautiful. "For spring," he said. "For the formal wedding if you still want one." Dira's eyes shone. "I want one. I want to stand up in front of the whole world and say you are mine, even if the world does not approve, especially then." January came with brief thaws and false springs. On a relatively warm day, Oliver decided it was time to go to town. They were running low on salt and sugar, and he wanted to buy fabric for Dira's wedding dress. He also needed to start laying the groundwork for their formal marriage, to make sure the valley knew what was coming. "I will go with you," Dira said. "Are you sure? It might be difficult, I know." Dira lifted her chin. "But I am going to be your wife. I will not hide." So they bundled up and made the 2-hour walk to the valley's small town. The children stayed behind with strict instructions to keep the fire going and not answer the door for anyone but Oliver and Dira. Kessa promised to keep her brothers safe, her hand resting on the large kitchen knife Oliver had left within reach. The town was small, just a main street with a general store, a blacksmith, a tavern, and the minister's house. Oliver led Dira to the general store first, hoping to complete their business quickly. But the moment they walked in, every head turned. Oliver felt Dira stiffen beside him. He took her hand, making it clear they were together, and walked to the counter. The shopkeeper, a man named Mr. Brennan who Oliver had traded with for years, stared at them with undisguised shock. "Yates, did not expect to see you until spring." "Needed supplies," Oliver said evenly. "Salt, sugar, flour if you have it, and I need to look at your fabric." That is an orc, Mr. Brennan said unnecessarily. This is Dira, my fiancée, Oliver corrected. We will be married in spring. The silence in the shop was deafening. Then a woman Oliver vaguely recognized spoke up from near the pickle barrel. You are marrying one of them. Have you lost your mind? I have gained a family, Oliver said. Dira and her 3 children have been staying with me since October. We will be formally married as soon as the minister can perform the ceremony. Mr. Brennan found his voice. Oliver, you seem like a reasonable man. You fought in the wars, you know what orcs are like. This is madness. This is love, Oliver said firmly. And it is my choice. Now, will you sell me supplies or not? The shopkeeper looked like he wanted to argue, but money was money. He gathered the items Oliver had requested with stiff, disapproving movements. When he quoted a price 3 times higher than normal, Oliver did not blink. That is robbery, and you know it. That is the price for orc lovers, Mr. Brennan said coldly. Before Oliver could respond, Dira squeezed his hand. We should go, she said quietly. We can manage without no. Oliver met Mr. Brennan's eyes. I will pay your inflated price this time, but you should know that come spring I will be talking to the magistrate about fair trading laws. And I will be telling everyone who asks why I do not shop here anymore. He paid, loaded the supplies into his pack, and guided Dira out of the shop. Behind them he could hear the whispers starting. That went about as well as expected, Oliver said grimly. I am sorry, Dira said. For what? You did nothing wrong. Oliver kissed her forehead. Come on, we still need to talk to the minister. Minister Wells was a younger man, educated at the capital and assigned to the valley 2 years ago. He listened to Oliver's request with a thoughtful expression, his eyes moving between Oliver and Dira. You understand this will be controversial, he said finally. I do, Oliver said, but there is no law against it. The king's decree 10 years ago affirmed that orcs are citizens with the same rights as humans. That includes the right to marry. The letter of the law, yes. But the spirit of community should be about people caring for one another, Dira said, speaking up for the first time. About neighbors helping neighbors. If your community cannot accept that, then perhaps the spirit needs to change. Minister Wells blinked, then smiled slightly. Well said. He turned to Oliver. I will perform the ceremony, but I warn you there may be consequences. People can be unkind. People have already been unkind, Oliver said, thinking of the shopkeeper. We will face it together. They set a date in late April when the roads would be clear and the weather pleasant. Minister Wells promised to file the necessary paperwork and to make it clear that the marriage was legal and binding. He also offered to speak to the community to try to smooth the way. Thank you, Oliver said, meaning it. They walked home through the snow, both quiet. Dira's hand was tight in Oliver's, and he knew she was troubled. Talk to me, he said when they were halfway home. I knew there would be prejudice, Dira said slowly. I have faced it my whole life. But I did not think about what it would cost you. Your reputation, your relationships with your neighbors are worth nothing if it means losing you, Oliver interrupted. Dira, I know what I am choosing. I am choosing you freely and gladly. Whatever comes, we will handle it. You are very certain. I am certain of you, that is enough. Dira stopped walking, turned to face him in the middle of the snowy road. I love you, Oliver Yates, more than I thought I could love anyone again. I love you too, Oliver said. Come on, let us get home to the children. They arrived back to find the farmhouse intact, and the children playing a card game Kessa had invented. Tavar launched himself at Oliver with a cry of relief, and Oliver swept him up, reassuring him that everything was fine. Over dinner, they told the children about the wedding date. Kessa immediately started planning, announcing that she would need a new dress too, and Pren asked if there would be dancing. The normalcy of it, the simple excitement of children looking forward to a celebration, eased some of the tension from the day. That night, lying in bed, Dira asked, "What if it is always like this? What if the valley never accepts us?" "Then we will make our own happiness here," Oliver said. "We have everything we need right here: food, shelter, love. The valley's approval would be nice, but it is not required." Dira was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You are a good man, Oliver." "I am a man who knows what matters," Oliver corrected. "And you matter, this family matters. Nothing else comes close." February was hard. The coldest month, the one where cabin fever set in and supplies ran low and tempers grew short. Oliver and Dira had their first real fight over something stupid whose turn it was to muck out the barn, and it escalated into all their unspoken fears and insecurities spilling out. "You do not understand what it is like to always be the outsider," Dira shouted. "To know that people hate you for what you are, not who you are." "You are right, I do not understand that," Oliver shouted back, "but I am trying. I am doing everything I can to build a life where you do not have to feel that way." "And what if it is not enough? What if the valley drives us out? What if they hurt the children? Then we will leave. We will go north to those settlements or west to the coast, or anywhere you feel safe." "But Dira, running away solves nothing. We have to stand somewhere sometime. Why not here where we have a home?" The fight ended with both of them in tears, holding each other and apologizing. It was messy and painful and necessary, and they came out of it stronger, more honest with each other. The children had been worried by the fighting, so Oliver and Dira sat them down and explained that sometimes people who love each other disagree, and that is normal and okay as long as they talk it through. "Did you stop loving each other?" Tavar asked, his eyes wide. "Never," Dira said firmly. "We were scared and frustrated, so we yelled. But we still love each other and we still love you. That never changes." "Grown-ups are weird," Pren announced, and that broke the tension, everyone laughing. March brought the first signs of spring. Snowmelt turned the roads to mud, and green shoots appeared in sheltered spots. Oliver started planning the spring planting, discussing crop rotation and field management with Dira. She had ideas he had never considered, ways to maximize yield without exhausting the soil, techniques her mother had taught her. "We could try planting beans between the corn rows," she suggested one evening, sketching on a piece of slate. "The beans add nutrients back to the soil, and the corn stalks give them something to climb." "That is brilliant," Oliver said, studying her drawing. "Why have I never thought of that?" "Because you were too busy doing everything alone," Dira said. She kissed his cheek. "Now you have help." They also started preparing for the wedding. Dira chose a simple design for her dress, and Oliver ordered the fabric from a different town, unwilling to give Mr. Brennan more business. Kessa helped her mother with the sewing, learning to make small, neat stitches. Oliver worked with Pren to build a arbor for the ceremony, a simple arch of woven willow branches. The invitations were trickier. Oliver did not have many friends in the valley, had always kept to himself. But there were a few neighbors he thought might come, people he had helped over the years. He wrote simple letters explaining the situation and inviting them to witness the wedding. Only one person responded positively. A widow named Mrs. Fletcher who lived 3 miles west. She wrote back saying that she would be delighted to attend, and that anyone who had a problem with love in any form could go hang. "I like her," Dira said when Oliver read the letter aloud. "I thought you might." April arrived with warm winds and sudden rains. The farm came alive, and there was suddenly more work than Oliver could keep up with. Dira proved invaluable, managing tasks he would have struggled to do alone. Kessa helped with planting, her careful hands perfect for setting seedlings. Pren took over feeding all the animals, forming special bonds with each one. Even Tavar contributed, carrying water and pulling small weeds. They worked from dawn to dusk, falling into bed exhausted every night. But there was satisfaction in it, the good tiredness of productive labor. Oliver watched his fields turn green and felt pride mixed with hope. This was going to work. They were going to make it. The week before the wedding, Mrs. Fletcher came to visit. She was a formidable woman in her 60s, tall and strong from a lifetime of farm work. She swept into Oliver's kitchen like she owned it, hugged Dira like they were old friends, and declared the children absolutely delightful. "Now then," she said, settling at the table with a cup of tea. "Let us talk about this wedding. You will need food for a celebration, even a small one." "I will bring pies and bread. Do you have meat?" "I was planning to roast a chicken," Oliver said. "One chicken? Nonsense, I will bring a ham. And you need flowers. I have early tulips that should be perfect. Dira, let me see this dress." Dira showed her the nearly finished gown, simple cream fabric with green embroidery at the cuffs and hem. Mrs. Fletcher examined it with a critical eye, then nodded. "Beautiful work. You have a good hand with a needle. Now, jewelry, do you have something?" "Oliver gave me a ring," Dira said, showing the braided silver. "That is for your hand. You need something for your neck." Mrs. Fletcher reached into her bag and pulled out a necklace, a simple silver chain with a pendant of polished green stone. "This was my daughter's. She died in childbirth 15 years ago. I think she would have liked you, and I think she would want you to wear this." Dira's eyes filled with tears. "I cannot." "You can and you will. Consider it a loan if it makes you feel better, but you are wearing it at your wedding, Mrs. Fletcher's voice was gruff, but her eyes were kind. "Thank you," Dira whispered. Mrs. Fletcher stayed for dinner and charmed the children completely, telling outrageous stories about her youth and teaching them a game involving string and quick fingers. When she left, she hugged Oliver and whispered, "You are doing the right thing. Do not let the bastards grind you down." "I will do my best," Oliver promised. The night before the wedding, Oliver and Dira lay awake talking about the future. "What if no one comes?" Dira asked. "Then it will be us, the children, Mrs. Fletcher and Minister Wells. That is enough. What if people make trouble? Then we will handle it together." "What if?" Oliver kissed her quiet. "No more what ifs. Tomorrow we get married. The day after we keep living our lives." "That is all we can control," Dira sighed. "You are annoyingly reasonable, one of my many charms." She laughed and settled against his chest. "I cannot wait to be your wife. I cannot wait to be your husband." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, peaceful and certain. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the sky a perfect blue and the air sweet with spring flowers. Oliver woke early and dressed in his best clothes, simple but clean. He went downstairs to find Kessa already up, decorating the kitchen with wildflowers she and her brothers had gathered. "You look nice," she said critically, "but you need to comb your hair better." Oliver let her fix his hair, amused by her serious expression. "Where are your brothers?" Pren is getting dressed. Tavar is helping Mama. Kessa stepped back, examining her work. "There. Now you look like someone getting married." "Thank you, Kessa, for everything." She hugged him suddenly, fiercely. "I am glad you opened the door that night. I am glad we stayed." "So am I," Oliver said, his throat tight. Mrs. Fletcher arrived mid-morning, her wagon loaded with food. She swept in and took over the kitchen, directing the boys in setting up tables outside while she arranged dishes. Minister Wells arrived shortly after, carrying his book and looking both nervous and pleased. And then Dira appeared at the top of the stairs, and Oliver forgot how to breathe. She was beautiful. The cream dress fit her perfectly, the green embroidery bringing out the color of her skin. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, woven through with small white flowers. Mrs. Fletcher's necklace gleamed at her throat. She smiled at Oliver, shy and radiant, and walked down to meet him. "You are stunning," Oliver managed. "You are not so bad yourself," Dira said, taking his hands. They walked outside together to the willow arbor Pren had helped build. The children stood to one side, scrubbed and smiling. Mrs. Fletcher and Minister Wells took their places. It was a tiny gathering, almost absurdly small for a wedding, but it felt right. Minister Wells opened his book and began. "We are gathered here to witness the union of Oliver Yates and Dira. Marriage is a sacred bond, a promise made before God and community to love and support one another through all the days of our lives." He spoke about love and commitment, about the courage it took to build a life together. He read from Scripture about love being patient and kind. And then he asked Oliver and Dira to speak their vows. Oliver went first, his voice steady. "Dira, when you knocked on my door in the middle of the night, you changed my life. You brought light into a house that had been dark too long. You brought laughter and purpose and love. I promise to cherish you and your children as my own. I promise to stand with you against whatever the world throws at us. I promise to work beside you, to dream with you, to grow old with you. You are my home, and I am yours from this day until my last." Dira was crying, happy tears streaming down her face. She squeezed his hands and spoke her own vows. "Oliver, you gave me hope when I had none left. You showed me that kindness still exists, that not all humans are enemies, that love can cross any divide. You protected my children and made them feel safe. You gave me a reason to believe in tomorrow. I promise to love you with everything I have. I promise to make this farm a true home. I promise to stand beside you, to work with you, to face whatever comes together. You are my future, and I choose you today and always." Minister Wells smiled. "By the authority vested in me by the kingdom and by God, I pronounce you husband and wife. Oliver, you may kiss your bride." Oliver pulled Dira close and kissed her as the children cheered, and Mrs. Fletcher dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. When they broke apart, both were grinning like fools. "Presenting Mr. and Mrs. Yates," Minister Wells announced, and it was done. They were married. The celebration was simple but joyful. They ate Mrs. Fletcher's ham and pies, drank cider, and danced to music Pren made on a wooden whistle. Kessa gave a speech about how happy she was to have Oliver as her new father, which made everyone cry again. Tavar fell asleep in Oliver's arms halfway through the afternoon, completely content. As the sun began to set, Mrs. Fletcher packed up her things and prepared to leave. She hugged Dira tightly and whispered something that made Dira laugh. Then she turned to Oliver. "You have a good thing here," she said. "Hold on to it, and if anyone gives you trouble, you send them to me. I have a reputation for being difficult, and I am happy to live up to it." "Thank you," Oliver said, "for everything. Thank you for having the courage to do this. The valley needs more people like you." Mrs. Fletcher climbed onto her wagon. "I will visit next month. We will have tea, and you can tell me how married life is treating you." She drove off into the sunset, waving. Minister Wells left shortly after, promising to file the marriage certificate and to speak to anyone who had concerns. And then it was just the five of them, a new family forged from unlikely circumstances. That night, after the children were asleep, Oliver and Dira sat on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "We did it," Dira said softly. "We are really married. We really are." Oliver wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "How do you feel? Happy, scared, hopeful?" Dira turned to look at him. "Ready for whatever comes next. Good, because I have plans." "Plans?" Oliver grinned. "I thought we could expand the vegetable garden. Maybe get a few more chickens. In a year or two, if we do well, we could think about adding a room onto the house. And I want to teach Kessa everything I know, make sure she has choices in life. Pren too, and Tavar when he is older. Those are good plans, Dira said. I have some too. I want to start a medicinal herb garden, things my mother taught me about. Maybe we could sell remedies in town, build a little income beyond the crops, and I want to have another baby. With you. Oliver's breath caught. Really, really. Not right away, but someday. I want Tavar to have a little brother or sister. I want to build this family with you. Dira's hand found his. Is that okay? That is more than okay. That is perfect. They sat in comfortable silence, planning their future under the stars. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be people who disapproved, who made their lives difficult. There would be hard seasons and failed crops and sickness and all the troubles that came with life. But they would face it together, this strange, wonderful family built from midnight desperation and open doors. Summer arrived with heat and long days of work. The crops grew tall and green, and Oliver's careful planning paid off in abundant yields. Dira's herb garden flourished, and she began making poultices and tinctures that she traded for supplies in the next town over, building relationships with people who did not care what species she was as long as her remedies worked. The children thrived. Kessa proved to be a natural leader, organizing her brothers and helping run the household with a competence beyond her years. Oliver started teaching her mathematics and science, and she soaked it up eagerly, already talking about maybe becoming a healer or a teacher someday. Pren's carpentry skills improved, and he built a beautiful set of chairs for the kitchen table, each one carved with different animals. Tavar followed everyone around, learning something new every day, his vocabulary growing until he could hold entire conversations about the farm and the animals and his family. In late July, Dira told Oliver she was pregnant. They stood in the kitchen at sunrise, her hand on her belly, both of them grinning like children. "A baby," Oliver said wonderingly. "Our baby." "Our baby," Dira confirmed. "Due in late winter, I think. February or March." Oliver swept her into his arms and spun her around, making her laugh. The children came downstairs to investigate the noise and were delighted by the news. Kessa immediately started planning, deciding that the baby should have the room next to hers so she could help. Pren offered to build a cradle. Tavar wanted to know if the baby would be a boy or a girl, and when told they would not know until birth, he declared that either was fine as long as the baby liked chickens. The pregnancy was easy, and Dira stayed healthy and strong throughout. As her belly grew, Oliver found himself even more protective, taking over the heavier farm work and insisting she rest more. Dira tolerated it with amused patience, knowing he just wanted to take care of her. In October, a year after that midnight knock, they had a small celebration. Mrs. Fletcher came to visit and brought a cake. They ate it on the porch, telling stories about the past year, about how much had changed and how much they had grown as a family. "You have built something good here," Mrs. Fletcher said, looking around at the thriving farm and the happy children. "Something that matters." "We have," Oliver agreed, his hand finding Dira's. "And we are not done yet." Winter came again, but this time the house was full and warm and waiting for new life. Dira slowed down as her pregnancy advanced, but she remained cheerful, knitting tiny clothes and preparing for the baby with Kessa's enthusiastic help. Oliver split his time between winter farm work and taking care of his family, and he had never been happier. The baby came on a cold February night, arriving in a rush after only a few hours of labor. Oliver held Dira's hand through it all, whispering encouragement, while Mrs. Fletcher served as midwife. The children waited downstairs, anxious and excited. When the baby finally arrived, healthy and screaming, Oliver cut the cord with shaking hands. Mrs. Fletcher cleaned the infant and wrapped it in soft blankets, then handed the bundle to Dira. "A boy," she announced. "A big, healthy boy." Dira cradled her son against her chest, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, little one. We have been waiting for you." The baby had green skin like his mother, with tiny pointed ears and a shock of dark hair. His eyes, when he opened them, were the same warm brown as Oliver's. He was perfect. "What will you name him?" Mrs. Fletcher asked. Oliver and Dira had discussed names for months. They looked at each other now, a silent conversation passing between them, and then Dira smiled. "Thomas," she said. "Thomas Yates." "Thomas," Oliver repeated, touching his son's tiny hand. The baby's fingers curled around his, gripping with surprising strength. "Welcome to the family, Thomas." They brought the baby downstairs to meet his siblings. Kessa was awed, touching Thomas's hand with gentle reverence. Pren declared him very small but acceptable. Tavar wanted to hold him immediately, and had to be taught how to support the baby's head. That night, the family gathered around the fireplace, passing baby Thomas from person to person, marveling at him. Oliver watched his family, this impossible, wonderful family, and felt a peace settle over him that he had never known before. This was what he had been searching for when he left the army. This was what he had been building toward with every crop planted, every fence mended, every season survived alone. Not just a house or a farm, but a home. Not just survival, but a life worth living. Dira caught his eye and smiled, understanding written in her expression. She knew. She felt it too. Spring came again, bringing with it new growth and new beginnings. Thomas grew chubby and healthy, his laughter filling the house. The older children doted on him, taking turns helping with his care. Oliver expanded the farm, adding new fields and more livestock. Dira's herbal remedy business flourished, and she began teaching Kessa the craft. Word of their family had spread through the valley, and reactions were mixed. Some people remained hostile, crossing the street when they saw Dira in town or making pointed comments. But others slowly began to come around. They saw the thriving farm, the happy children, the obvious love between Oliver and Dira. They saw that this family, however unconventional, was built on solid foundations. More people started buying Dira's remedies, asking her advice on ailments. A few even came to the farm to visit, curious about the orc woman who had married the reclusive veteran. Dira met them all with grace and dignity, never apologizing for who she was but always willing to prove her worth through her actions. Mrs. Fletcher became a regular visitor, practically adopting the whole family as her own. She taught Kessa to bake and Dira to quilt, shared stories of her life and listened to theirs. She became the grandmother the children had never had, and she clearly delighted in the role. By the time Thomas was 6 months old, the family had settled into a comfortable routine. Oliver and Dira ran the farm together, each bringing their own strengths to the partnership. The children were happy and healthy, growing in confidence and skill. The future stretched out before them, full of possibility. One evening in late summer, the whole family sat on the porch watching the sunset. Thomas dozed in Dira's arms. Kessa read aloud from a book while Pren whittled and Tavar played with the farm dog at their feet. Oliver sat beside his wife, his arm around her shoulders, and looked out over his land. "You remember that first night?" Dira asked softly. "When we knocked on your door?" "Every detail," Oliver said. "You could barely stand. The children looked half-starved. I thought my heart would break. I thought you would turn us away. Every other door had been slammed in our faces, but you let us in. You saved us." "You saved me too," Oliver said. "I just did not know I needed saving until you arrived." Dira leaned her head on his shoulder. "We built something good here, didn't we?" "We did. We really did." They sat together as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple, the farm settling into evening quiet around them. This was home. This was family. This was the life they had chosen and fought for and built together, one day at a time, and it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.